it's a story about passion, potential, and hope. It's helping people get out of their ruts, and it doesn't matter where you came from, what your background is. What are you going to do to be a winner, and what are you going to do to be the victor in life?
What are you going to do? This is the Sales Bible Podcast, episode 359, $1 Billion Sales Secrets, an interview with Joe Paranteau.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. And today our guest is Joe Paranteau. He's a sales director and author of the soon-to-be-published book, $1 Billion Sales Secrets. Joe's a leading expert, which is why I brought him on the podcast. He's actually sold more than $1 billion within 5 years, something not many people do. He's led a bunch of sales teams, and he's worked for both Fortune 500 companies and startups. Today, Joe and I babble about business. We babble about sales management, the poverty mindset, quotas, metrics, and the behavior sellers can embrace to close $1 billion in revenue. And so, with no further ado, let's get to Joe. Welcome, Joe. You ready to babble?
I am ready to babble.
Joe, you've got a new book out. I'm looking here on Amazon. It looks like it's actually coming out in March, and it's called $1 Billion Sales Secrets. $1 billion? That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
How did you get this title?
It's I've always wanted to write a book in my selling career. I've been selling quite a while, about 28 years. The first tell for writing a book is people say, "Oh, you should write a book," and I'm like, "Yeah." I sort of discounted it for a long time. Avid reader of other sales books, but it wasn't until I kept pursuing bigger and bigger sales roles. And I work today at Microsoft. So all the views that I have here are my own, not of Microsoft's. But I had an opportunity to work in roles where my quotas were astronomical. We're talking like 300, 400 million annual. And after I sold $1 billion in 5 years, I came to the conclusion that, hey, I think I've got some ideas here on how to sell. I think I've figured out a few things. So wanted to really approach it with a giving attitude and share it with others. So that's where the title comes from, really designed to bring sales secrets to anyone, whether they're a veteran or someone just getting started in sales, non-sales people.
Now, I don't know if quota really tells you a whole lot. You know, some companies have a high quota and some have a low.
Exactly.
It really depends on the price point, and some companies don't have a lot of profit. How do you think the quotas that you had affected the writing of this book?
I think quota is one of those things that I learned in my career. It's always an abstraction, and it's similar to what you said. It depends upon the context that you're in. I've been in small companies that are starting up where, hey, quota means everyone gets paid next week. So pretty important when you're going to make payroll by the sales that you make. So that's when, quota is very important. And, the numbers are really geared towards something. There's some metric behind the numbers. What I think sellers need to do is just connect, to customers, figure out what that looks like. What is your quota number telling you and how you should connect to customers, how you should partner. And if you don't have a quota, think about in terms of goals. If you're a business owner, what do you want to achieve in revenue growth, customer growth? So I think everyone runs by a quota system, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, I think goals are really important. Maybe a better metric may be the number of deals that you closed.
The first sales role that I started out in was a telesales role. And they had a quota. They thought that, this was a great example of setting the metric, and it was 120 dials a day. That was, hey, if you do that, you're going to be successful. We also had a numerical quota. I found that I was only making 40 calls a day. So on one hand, people were, looking at me saying, oh, you should really get to 120 calls a day. But after a few months, I was doing 100% of my number, 300, 400, still making 40 calls a day. And they found that it was context. I was just spending more time, consulting with customers, finding out what they wanted, connecting, building better connections and bigger deals.
That totally makes sense. So when the company saw that, did they change their policies and how they deal with the sales staff?
They did. They started looking at the numbers and said, let's do longer call time. They were looking not only at the number of calls, but if you had 120 dials and connections a day, were you speaking a minute to each person, or were you really developing a relationship via the phone? So they did change their numbers.
Good for them. Because I actually said that kind of skeptical because I thought they were going to go a different direction. I thought they were going to say something like, nah, and they quit bugging you, but they kept on troubling everybody else. Good for them for taking action and steering the organization in the right direction.
And they grew. I was at a time in their growth that they were growing fast, so they grew quite a bit as well. So yeah, so sometimes companies do the right thing and listen on quotas.
So that's an example of a really successful salesperson like yourself. What about other people? What about other experienced salespeople? Where are they being held back? Where they're not excelling as well as they want in their profession, and their bosses would like to see them excel even more so?
I think, the reason I love sales, I think everyone in sales who is successful, especially over a period of years, you have to learn that, whatever was good yesterday was good yesterday. New skills, new development, growth, always learning, I think is a really critical aspect of helping experienced salespeople get better. For me personally, not only am I glutton for punishment in writing the book, but I did so at the same time I finished my MBA. So I started my MBA probably 16, 17 years ago. And felt it was a good time to finish it and complete it. It's really tough to go through that, but those are examples. Never stop learning. Be committed to growth, and you'll always find that you're learning something, you're sharpening the saw, you're making yourself more valuable for your customers, for the market, for employers. I think that's where the experienced salespeople can help. If you think you've got it figured out, well, guess what? I don't.
Yep. Well, the great thing about Sales Babble listeners is they're all about lifelong learning. So that's why they're listening and listening to me babble. So that's a good segue. I think at the top, when we were talking about, you said there's a dozen different things that you wanted to cover in this book. Was that right? Was there 12?
So I cut the book in half, actually. There were, when I started writing this book, just to describe the process that I went through, I started by putting 1 million Post-it notes on the wall. And it caused me to, as a seller, I was unconsciously competent in many different things. I could tell other people, hey, this is a good approach that you should take, but I really didn't know why it was effective until I started, breaking it apart with the spirit of giving back to people. I started writing this book because I wanted to provide people with skills and resources that they could use, no matter if they were new in sales, or seasoned, to progress, their career. And I came up with 15 different secrets. Some of the secrets are, as I put my Post-it notes on the wall, I thought to myself, I'm like, what have I never seen in sales books ever? And I decided to, I kind of ranked them and said, okay, this is important. I'm going to put this in the book.
Well, I don't know if we have time to go through all 15, but maybe we could go through a few that you think might be the most interesting to the listeners.
A couple things that I'll share with you. One, sales is a lot about your internal motivation, and the book is really, I like to say the book's a love story. I love I love sales. I absolutely love sales, but I never sought this career out. I was an accidental seller. I was looking for a job out of college. I had a background in communication and engineering, high-tech industry. And Lorraine, who's one of my mentors, she said, "Hey, selling isn't, what you think it is. It's not sleazy. You don't have to be disingenuous. It's all about helping people get what they need or want." And ever since that time, I really reflected on what she said, and I've made that, kind of my mantra with myself. So when I look in the mirror every day and get up, I ask myself, am I helping someone today? And secret number one was all about that. It's all about looking inside. It's a story about passion, potential, and hope. It's helping people get out of their ruts. And it doesn't matter where you came from, what your background is. What are you going to do to be a winner? And what are you going to do to be the victor in life? So starting with yourself is one of those things that I didn't see in a lot of sales books. I've got a controversial chapter in here that's called Sales Managers Suck. But the reason I put that in there is every salesperson has to deal with obstacles. Sometimes the obstacles might be in your own company. It's no different than a sale. What do you do when you're dealing with, and let's say it's not a sales manager. Let's say you're a seasoned sales executive. Well, guess what? It's the board. It's your CEO. It's your investors. There's always someone else who you have to answer to. And so it's kind of tips and tricks for dealing with those people. And then another chapter that I put in here is, what do you do if you're successful? I haven't seen anyone talk about that. There was a time when I started, getting success in my sales career that I did everything wrong. I went out to Morton's every night of the week, spent money like it was going out of style, bought cars and different things, and poof. I felt like, some of these pro athletes who just get their first taste of money. So those are three cool things in the book that I think break the mold from traditional, sales how-to.
Let's look at one of them.
Sure.
Sales managers suck.
Everyone loves that one.
Yeah, I just listened to a podcast the other day by Brene Brown. We were talking about the silliness of commissions for salespersons because, if you look at practically any other profession, we don't measure people we don't pay them on how much work they do necessarily. Like we don't pay firefighters more money if they put out more fires, because if you did that, who knows, they would start becoming arsonists and starting fires. But that's a common thing in the sales profession, and sales managers have this silly idea that everybody is motivated only by money, which as a sales manager I found certainly not true. There's lots of things that motivates people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, it's an interesting chapter because now guess what I am? I'm a sales manager. I manage teams.
I see that you're actually a sales director at Microsoft.
Yeah. So people are like, okay, he's throwing rocks at his own glass house. What does that mean? But I think, one of the first things that's obvious, people, they might pick up the book and they'll flip to that chapter because that's what they're going through right now. They're like, oh. And real quickly, I point out, hey, is this valid? Or is this, something that's a mental barrier for you, an excuse that's holding you back? Have you told yourself the lie that the reason that I'm not successful is because of a manager? And if, back to mindset, if that's what you're telling yourself, then you're really doing yourself a disservice, because as a sales professional, you're all about, dancing over obstacles. You you look at them in a different way. So why should you look at at this any different? And I also speak to managers about how they, because they'll look at this and go, "Oh my gosh, do I suck?" It's all, I can't tell you how many managers I've had in the past who I've shared the book with, so far, and they're like, "Okay, which one am I? Which person am I in this book?" And they want me to tell them, and I'm like, "No, that's not the point of it." Yeah, so I think the challenge for managers suck is because they approach management really as they don't look at themselves enough. They have different tendencies to manage performance, and this happens a lot when you have someone who's a seller who is successful at selling and they're promoted in management. They're like, "Hey, we'll promote Jean because she's a great seller and she's crushing her quota, so therefore she's going to be a great manager." Well, the first thing Jean does is she gets up there and says, "Hey, everyone do just exactly what I did. It's my way or the highway." And instead, what successful managers do is you find out, hey, who's on the team? What do they do well? What don't they do well? I always like to accentuate what people do well and then shore up weaknesses by outsourcing it. Find someone else who can do that really well, bring them on your team, partner with somebody who can do something well. But I think, sales management's not linear. There's not, you deal with people, people are, the best advice that I had before I got into into sales management is, someone told me, just remember, these are people. And he paused like that, and I looked at him. And he's like, they all have their own things going on in life, and it's really a great thing to remember now for sales managers who are out there listening, is that this is the toughest time in human history to sell. And what your sellers need now more than anything is you to be on their side, to be empathetic, to be a cheerleader, to be a coach, to be a business confidant. And so when you read this, you'll read different types of behaviors that you might, understand that you're exhibiting. And you'll also read some behaviors of excellent sales managers.
So where do sales managers suck in your mind?
Right now, the Captain Obvious COVID economy, there's a couple things that make it really tough. Global pandemic, brought things to a screeching halt for a lot of businesses. It's forced, intense competition. It's made it a lot more challenging to deal with different types of complexity from a customer standpoint. Customers are changing so rapidly. Again, what worked yesterday might not be working today. You might have a business that you've worked with. Well, guess what? Today they changed their entire business plan. So salespeople have to be more agile. They have to be more empathetic. They have to be more in touch with their customers than ever before. And if they're not, someone else will.
This is the toughest time to sell. Why? I don't know if that has anything to do with the pandemic necessarily. In fact, I think Microsoft done pretty well, right?
Yes, Microsoft did extremely well. However, I think one of the things that's interesting in the pandemic is, you're going to have businesses that succeed and businesses fail because of, I think certain things happened during the pandemic. Let's take supply chain. Global supply chains were broken.
Yes.
The first indication that I had that this was coming to us in one way, shape, or form was Ford.
Yes.
Ford in January started calling down the number of cars that they were going to ship. And they said supply chain problems. And I saw what was happening in China, and I kind of put two and two together. I'm like, interesting. And there have been others. It's breweries who haven't been able to source hops. So things of that nature have made it a challenge.
It's interesting if you look at these two things that you have here, that sales managers suck and what does it mean when you get success? It all kind of ties into the first thing you said, that it's all about mindfulness, that you need to look deeper into yourself. How did you make that leap?
Correct. And it's my background. Like I said, I started selling when I was 8 years old out of necessity. I grew up poor. I'm the first generation of my family to grow up off an Indian reservation. So we're from Montana, Little Shell Tribe. It's a place called Box Elder, Montana. It's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And was the first to go to college. But growing up, we didn't have anything. And I remember painting rocks to sell as paperweights just so we could have enough money to buy food. To go from that to where I am today seems just inconceivable, even to me. But it speaks to mindfulness, because most people give up before they get started. They don't think of themselves, I'll just take poverty for example. Poverty is a mindset. It's all about how you perceive yourself. And I had to learn that I had a poverty mentality for a while and then develop an abundance mentality. Once you start seeing things as limitless and abundant, man, it changes your world. It absolutely changes your world. Part of it is just, you hate where you're at and you want better. I think it's a great motivation. And that's why you see the people flocking to America still. They want opportunity. They see what they don't have, and it's a powerful, powerful emotion. For me, I also had people in my life at the right point in time who I got mentoring from and people I looked up to, business owners. I had some entrepreneurial people in my life early on that was a game changer. So,
isn't it amazing how some people just show up at the right time and it completely amazes you and completely transforms you? How generous of these people.
Absolutely. And there are things, another great thing that I encountered was I always wanted to be a pilot.
You were in the Air Force.
I was in the Air Force, and I wrote, I'd listen on the radio to, at this time we were living in upstate New York, but I listened on the radio to the people doing traffic. I'm like, I'm going to write him a letter and see if he'll take me up. I was about 10 years old. Unbeknownst to my mom, the phone rings one day. She answers it, and she gets off the phone. She hands the phone to me. She's like, yeah, it's Captain Scott King. He wants to give you a ride in his airplane, and we're meeting him at the airport. Why didn't you tell me about this? And I'm like, Mom, because you'd tell me no. That's why. So, but that's such life. How many times do you have a wild, crazy ass idea and someone in your family, your friend is going to say, oh, you can't do that. But that's what it's all about. It's, we listen and believe those messages that we receive from people, good and bad. And if you have ideas and dreams and all you're getting is like, you'll never be able to do that. Don't listen to them. Just go out and do your crazy thing, because the world was built on crazy ideas.
Yeah, sometimes we just don't reach as high as we could because we listen to what others tell us, other people's opinions. Those opinions hold us back.
Yeah, and it's so sad to see, squandered or lost potential in so many people. One of the things I love to do is find that potential and promote it as fast as you can. It's if there are people who are better than you, and that's kind of that's that mindset link of of sales managers and mindset. If you find people who are really superstars, then give them a shot. Keep them going. If they've got something good to give the world, let the world hear it.
What's something people can really do? What's one thing that people can really do to make their bosses happy?
That's a great question. And I'd say how we show up uh, every day with consistency is something that's pretty easy to make bosses happy. To let them know that you're dependable, but also, when you show up, just show up with enthusiasm, with no excuses. Take accountability, and you'll find that typically, if you're your energy is high and you're modeling integrity and you believe in yourself and you're authentic, then I think that's a great way to show up today.
Great advice, really great advice, Joe. If people want to find your book, it's on Amazon, right, Joe? When's it coming out?
It's coming out on March 5th, and it will be on Amazon and most bookstores. So we're getting distribution right now. If you go on Amazon, you'll just see a Kindle version. We've got the paperback that we're loading. My cover designer just had a baby the other day. So
that's a lame excuse.
I know. It's like, of all things in life, but the great news is, we segmented it out to give us some time to get that out there. I'm excited for everyone to read it. I'm more excited to have people engage with it. It's like I said, it's not like a lot of the sales books that you've read before, because I challenge you right from the start to, and I've got some note sections in the back that you can work on it as you go. But I really designed this from a giving attitude. If you're expecting, the sales tips of all the things that I've done that are great, I've got some sales tips in there, but it's more about helping you go through your own journey.
Cool. And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way of doing that?
So my last name is very hard to spell, Paranteau. So I go by J Par internally at Microsoft. People know me as J Par. The J Par, THEJPAR, prevents people from having to spell my name. So most social media platforms, you can find me at the J Par. So LinkedIn, the J Par, Facebook, the J Par, all those, Instagram. My website is not that. It's actually down today, but it's jparanteau.com. But I'm really looking forward to having people engage with me. Tell me a little bit about what some of the things that they need, some of the things that they've experienced and seen. And I've already got 3/4 of the way through my next book. So getting audience participation will help with that one as well.
So at the time of this recording, the House and the Senate's working on a stimulus package, but you've got a stimulus package too.
Yes, I've got my own stimulus package. It's called the Sales Stimulus Package. And, the stimulus that the government gives you is insufficient and probably gone in an instant once you get it. The stuff I'm giving is going to help you long term. So you'll be able to take it and help your customers and put money in your pocket and really develop good mindsets that'll serve you for a lifetime. So I'm really excited to be giving your audience the sales stimulus package.
Yeah, there's a link here. I'll make sure and place that in the show notes. It's kind of long, but I'll just stick the link in here. JoeParanteau.com, $1 billion sales secrets.
Yeah. Well, the bit.ly link that I have to it, I created a bit.ly. It's just bit.ly /JPAR Babel.
Babel.
So just exclusively for the Sales Babel listeners.
This is a very exclusive, folks. Very exclusive.
It is.
You're behind the velvet rope. Joe, thank you for babbling here on Sales Babble. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Pat, this was a lot of fun, and I'm really I just want to thank listeners for spending time with us today to grow and learn a little bit more. Happy selling.
The world has changed dramatically in the last year, and not just the last year, in the last 10 years. And the nature of sales, as you and I know it, has changed as well. If you're looking for a place that's got some fresh ideas on how to level up your sales game, Joe Paranteau is the guy for you. If you go to the show notes at www.salesbabble.com, you can find links to his book, $1 Million Sales, as well as links to the sales gifts and worksheets that he mentioned for all of you Sales Babble listeners. And while you're there on Sales Babble, there are tons of information, worksheets, ebooks, free material for you to improve your selling skills. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and click the Babble Me button. Maybe you've got some advice on topics and things you'd like to hear about here on Sales Babble. Maybe you've got a guest that you'd like to recommend. I'd love to hear from you. Hey, that's all we've got for this week's folks. Until next week, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.